everybody. Welcome to A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry. The mirror may be darkly, but we are not as darkly because we got a ring light and we've turned out the LEDs over our heads, and I think we look a little bit more real. Not quite as washed out.
And we're high definition now.
Yes,
too.
and we're in high definition. So welcome to...
Although we're in higher definition on YouTube than we are on Facebook. Facebook only allows you to do 720p. With YouTube, we're at 1080p.
Okay, so if you really want to see the sun damage on my chest, go to YouTube. That's what I notice when I go on, is my little frecklies right here.
Yeah, but as far as I can tell, there's no way to do better than 720p on Facebook. If anybody has insight into that, let me know. But as far as I can tell, that's the maximum they let you do. So, anyway.
So our topic today is fear not science. There's been a lot of discussion about, follow the science, and science says. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of argument about what science says and what the, and people arguing back and forth, well, science says this, and then another person says, well, science says something exactly the opposite.
Well, part of the problem is that...
I'm not done with my intro. We're not to the topic yet. So anyway, remember that we do the show in 10-minute segments, so please feel free to comment on YouTube as well as on Facebook. I can see all the feeds now. Oh, we got a comment that says it looks great. What Steve's seeing, so that's good. So anyway, so if you have a comment or a show topic suggestion at the 10-minute break. I'll go ahead and bring those things into the conversation. So feel free to comment. We're always happy to have comments. And the one time the Facebook feed got stuck, and I felt really bad about that because it was some good stuff on there. But it did give us a show topic for the following week. So that worked out nicely.
And that's the other thing. If anybody has show topics, we would be happy to hear them.
Yes, because otherwise it's us it's him coming up with them.
Yeah, she doesn't help.
No, I have no help whatsoever. I just show up and talk. So, because talking is what I do.
Yes.
So I'm going to start the timer, and you may start with your intro that I interrupted.
No, that's fine. One of the issues that affects the public discourse is people say, listen to the science, or the science says this, or you got to pay attention to scientists, and on and on. And I think people don't fully comprehend what science is. Science is not an authority figure. It is not somebody to trust. It is not something to trust, in the sense that, it's the pronouncement from Mount Sinai that, okay, this is the way things are. That's not science. That's listening to somebody's opinion and saying that because they have certain training or whatever, they're an authority figure, and so we need to pay attention to them. That's contrary to the nature of what science is. Science is a methodology. Science is a way of trying to find out what the truth is. And to put it in an overly simplified manner, science is... the method of science is that you look at what's going on, you come up with a guess, an educated guess, as to what you think is the theory that's going to explain that, and then you run experiments to see whether or not you can destroy your theory. If your theory survives, then that gives you some level of confidence that perhaps this theory at least is on the right path to the way things are. The longer you go, the more experiments that you run with not being able to disprove your theory, then it moves towards the realm of fact. So, for instance, a very old theory that is very firmly established now are Einstein's theories of relativity, both the special and general theories of relativity. Because over the last, it's getting close to 100 years now, experiments have been run, and all of the experiments match what Einstein's theories predict. That's the other aspect of a good theory, is the theory should have predictive value. That is, it needs to be both testable and predictive. And if it's not predictive and if it's not testable, then it's not science anymore. one of the logical fallacies, and this is why I see with the way people talk about science sometimes, is the idea of authority. That is, we have to listen to somebody in authority. No, you don't. You can question authority. In fact, it's wise to question authority. It's healthy to question authority. I learned very young that authorities are often stupid.
Okay, so appeal to authority.
Yes, that's a logical fallacy. That is, do what...
That wasn't my question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So when people say you have to listen to the science, that really is an appeal to authority.
That's an appeal to authority.
Which is logical fallacy,
Right.
which I was going to point out.
Good.
So just saying that is a logical fallacy.
The way it's phrased is the problem. And one of the things that this seems to bother people, and it's weird, that because scientists disagree among themselves, therefore we shouldn't pay attention to what they say. And of course, that's not right either. That is, the scientific method works. That is, the fact that you're sitting on your computer or your cell phone listening to this demonstrates that science is rather valuable. These things wouldn't exist without the underlying science. That is, engineering grows out of the science. But you have to be careful not to think in terms of this individual scientist is infallible. No scientist in his right mind would ever argue that way. Scientists know that they're not infallible. They know they're fallible. And what they will do is they'll show you, okay, this is what we think is going on based on X, Y, and Z. And so at this point, this is what we think reality is. If it's something new, you have less reason to be certain about it, and they will couch it in those terms. You'll see the same thing with any scientific study. The way the news media presents it, there's a new study and it proves that, coffee is bad for you. No, that's not what the study did. The study they had a trial, and they tested something on a certain number of people, and so you have to know, okay, how many people were there? What was it that they were testing? How did they test? All the details of what's going on before you can say, well, yeah, that may or may not be of any consequence whatsoever. Half the things that you hear, just there's nothing to them.
Well, speaking of trials, like drug trials, for example,
Right.
people are like, well, I'm really, especially like where the vaccine's concerned. Now, full disclosure, we're pro-vaccine and we plan to get our
As soon as
coronavirus
possible.
one as soon as we can. We've gotten our flu shots. He gets them every year. Sometimes I don't get around to it and I miss it. But I did get it this year.
My mother will call me, at the beginning of the season every year and ask, have you gotten your flu shot yet? She's very concerned that I will do that.
Yes. So anyway, so we are very pro-vaccine. But one of the things to understand about side effects, anytime there's a drug trial, whether it's for a vaccine, whether it's for some other medication,
or
right? They put people on a trial, and some get a placebo, some get the regular drug, unbeknownst to the person taking it, and then any illness or any ill effects that they experience during the trial is listed. Now, you can get a cold. Let's say that you are in a drug trial for something I'm just going to pick something really bizarre to have a drug for, hangnails. Okay, so you're taking this drug because they have this drug now they think that will cure hangnails. And so you get a cold just by happenstance. From being out in the world, you catch a cold. They have to list that as a side effect of this hangnail drug.
Even though it had nothing to do with
right,
it.
because they don't know.
Right.
Did it lower some part of your immune system and that allowed you to get this cold? They don't know.
Right.
So they list all those things. So then, and if somebody randomly dies, just, something
They get hit by a bus.
weird, yeah. You could get hit by buses by taking this hangnail medication. But anyway, if somebody just kind of randomly dies, that would be considered a side effect of the drug. So then when you hear all the side effects of the drug, it's like, oh my gosh, the cure is worse than the illness. But that's not actually true, because some of those are extremely rare, and they'll tell you in the commercials, and when you actually read the literature, it says extremely rare. extremely rare, catching a cold and being hit by a bus. Okay, more commonly, you might feel some discomfort, after swallowing it, or you might break out in a rash because, like, of 100 people, 40 of them broke out in a rash. So it's important to understand that about the side effects. And we do have a very safe process that's been proven over the years to produce really safe drugs. Are there problems with them? Of course. Anytime you change how your body functions, that could potentially be a problem. And that's really what a drug is. It changes how your body functions. And so, and I'm not a medical professional, but I have read about this stuff. I've watched a lot of documentaries and things like that about how drugs come to be and stuff like that. And people just think that I don't know, there's people out there that are really leery. And of course you want to be careful. When the chickenpox vaccine first came out and they offered it for my oldest daughter, I was like, yeah, I don't think that chickenpox are that dangerous. And they're like, well, some people do die from them. Okay, in my experience, never saw anybody die from the chickenpox. I know you can have scars if you scratch them too much. I know it's annoying, but you want your kids to catch them and get it done with. But now knowing about shingles, that could be an issue. If you've had chickenpox, you could have shingles when you get older. So when it came time to vaccinate my 2 younger girls, my youngest, because she had some other issues, the doctor said the last thing you want is for her to have chickenpox. And I thought about that. I was like, yeah, no, I think her with chickenpox would be really hard to endure. So I went ahead and got her the vaccine. Then my middle daughter, who's really close in age to her, we decided to vaccinate her at the same time. And then eventually I thought, Vanessa's getting a little older. She hasn't had chickenpox yet. It's not as prevalent as it was because of the vaccine. And so I thought it would be a really bad thing if I didn't get it for her. And then when she was an adult and was pregnant and got chickenpox, that would be a really bad thing. So I decided that because of the timing of it, it was best to get her chickenpox vaccine. So all 3 girls of mine have had the chickenpox vaccine. But I did question it because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But supposedly people do die from it.
Yeah.
I have never heard, I've never seen anything on the news, 5 children at
yeah, well, it's
blah,
like
blah, blah, elementary school died of
a certain
chickenpox.
number of people die of flu each year, but I don't personally know anybody that has.
Yeah.
So,
but
I would prefer not to have the flu because it's unpleasant.
Right.
And at this point, any kind of a vaccine against any kind of an illness, I'm all for it, because why do I want to go through an illness if I can avoid it?
Right.
What's the advantage of this?
And it's important to discuss it with your doctor too, especially if you have any kind of outstanding health issues like heart issues and things like that.
And there are some people that are not able to be vaccinated, which is why it's so important for those of us that are capable of being vaccinated to get vaccinated, because we help protect those people that are not capable of having a vaccine.
Right.
For whatever medical reason.
And then, there's the conspiracy theorist that, Bill Gates is going to chip us all. You know what? We're already chipped.
Yeah, you got this thing. It's tracking every place you go. And you don't care.
Or you can shut it off if you do care.
Yeah.
So, just, this whole thing about being chipped and the mark of the beast and all that kind of stuff is the stuff that comes out of the backs of horses or out of the backs of bulls.
Yeah. We should do something again about
conspiracy theories.
Well, not necessarily conspiracy theories, but regarding the interpretation of eschatology. As the late great planet Earth and the Left Behind series are not the only understandings of the relevant biblical texts. Anyway.
Well, there's a show topic.
Yeah.
And so we'll kill that rabbit. Shh, I'm hunting rabbits. Yeah, that would be a good show topic.
let's just say shortly, the short bit to peak interest.
Yes.
The
Whet your
mark that
appetite.
the mark of the beast had something to do with the Roman Empire and has nothing to do with the future. Anyway, but yes, one of the things too that you'll run across is the the war between science and religion, and there are Christians that are very uncomfortable oftentimes with science, or at least certain aspects of it. And that's an unfortunate thing because, again, science is a methodology. And what will happen is, the literature will talk about something that people feel contradicts what Scripture says. And so they say, well, should I accept what the Bible says? Should I accept what science says? I'm going to accept what the Bible says because, I feel that's more authoritative. The difficulty, though, is that what science does is it's attempting to make sense of the world around us. Mm-hmm. And when we read the Bible, we attempt to make sense of what we're reading on the page. And both activities involve us thinking about and considering the different data that's available and coming to conclusions as to what that data means. And one thing I've noticed with a lot of Christians is they have a hard time comprehending the possibility that they might be misunderstanding the biblical texts. Mm-hmm. And that the contradiction they see between the biblical texts and the scientific literature may actually be a problem with how they're interpreting the biblical text. Mm-hmm. And if they altered their interpretation of the biblical text, suddenly the contradiction with scientific literature would go away. That is, yes, scientific literature can sometimes be flawed, but then also sometimes we can have problems with.
Well, I don't think that science and religion have to be mutually exclusive. Like,
No,
what's
they're
in the
not.
Bible? Like, it's not like I only believe the Bible or I only believe science. And I think anybody that falls in that place, YouTube is having some issues. It keeps flashing yellow.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Facebook is fine.
Okay.
But,
That could be
anyway.
a YouTube thing.
yeah. So if you're on YouTube and you're having issues with hearing us, we are aware that.
Oh, now it's stable.
Yeah, it was. It was. I was watching it. It was unstable, then stable, then unstable, then stable. So it may be them.
Yeah.
But then there's some widget thing there it's talking about. I don't know what that is. But anyway, science and religion don't have to be mutually exclusive.
No.
You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, one thing I have really struggled with, and that is 6 days of creation as stated in the Bible versus what we know from light speed, what we know from the fossil records and things like that. And it's
Radiometric dating of things. And
that, because I know what that is.
Yes.
But,
There's several things that indicate the universe is much older than what traditionally has been thought.
So I'm not going to throw out my faith because it doesn't agree with what I'm seeing in science, but I'm not going to throw out science because it doesn't totally seem to jive with my faith. What I believe is we as humans don't fully understand it. Mm-hmm. And our thinking is flawed because it's so limited. We only live for a short period of time. And if you recall from the Tower of Babel incident, God said, these people, they're a bunch of 3-year-olds. If I leave them alone long enough to their own devices, they're going to figure out how to get the cookies off the top of the refrigerator. And so he had to separate the 3-year-olds because that's what we are. We're very determined toddlers that want the cookies that are on top of the fridge. And we're going to stack up chairs and help each other to get up to the cookies on the top of the fridge.
Yeah. Because God created us to be like Him.
Right. Well, and He created us, though, to live forever. And
that too.
Because of the fall, now we don't. So in order to keep the mystery in the universe and give us something to do for eternity, he made it really big and a lot of stuff out there. And so, what was I going to say?
Don't know.
But I think that if you are just saying, well, the fossil record can't be true, or, okay, so this is where I went for a while, that God created everything old so that it would appear like, it's like you, like when you
Like
create a movie set,
Right.
you want the buildings to look old. You don't want them to look
so
like you
Star
just
Wars,
built them.
So in Star Wars, everything looks used and worn out.
Right,
and-
but it's your first day on set, and
Right.
it's like, wow, who was already here? Oh no, we just built it to look like this. But that was where I
creating an
went
illusion.
first, yeah.
Yes.
So,
But there's problems with that concept in that then God is trying to trick us.
right,
Which is questionable. Plus then, and this is where the astronomical observations come in, and one that I like to use regularly is 1987A. You ask, what in the world is 1987A? 1987A was a supernova in the
no,
Larger
Facebook's
Magellanic
issues.
Cloud. You have two tiny galaxies that are gravitationally associated with the Milky Way. They're relatively close, but relatively close in astronomy is really a long ways off. And so we're talking hundreds of thousands of light years away. Now, this raises the question. You have a supernova explosion that shows up in 1987. It was the first supernova explosion of 1987, hence it's 1987A. If God created the universe 6,000 years ago, and the Larger Magellanic Cloud is, say, 180,000 light years away, that means that God put a fake supernova explosion into the light 6,000 years ago so that we would see it in 1987. This seems oddly complicated versus perhaps just assuming that what we're seeing is what actually happened, in which case we're looking at something that happened 186,000 years ago, which means the universe has to be older than that. And that's the problem with the astronomical observations in general. That is, light travels at a certain rate. If you were seeing something that's 3 billion light years away, you were seeing how it looked 3 billion years ago. You really cannot get around that. I'm sorry. And one of the things that has frustrated, see, I was gap theory. In high school and then in college, I was exposed to modern day creationism. And one of the things that I've noticed in creationist literature, as I've read a lot of it, is that the astronomical issues are ignored for the most part because there is no answer to them. And I find that disturbing. And so and then all evidence, particularly if you read it in Hebrew, isn't really compatible with the modern creationist interpretation of Genesis. So it was my understanding of Hebrew and reading the Bible that led me away from modern creationism.
and
Which
I
is
think
perhaps a different way than most people end up leaving the idea. That is, rather than being affected by the science, I was more affected by the Bible doesn't say this.
yeah. We're aware too now that Facebook is also having streaming issues, and I'm watching it buffer a little bit, so we're getting yellow flashes now on Stream 1.
Interesting.
So they're kind of switching off. So I don't know, maybe it's the church's internet?
It's possible the church's internet is a little bit wonky today.
Yeah.
Perhaps before we leave, you'll reboot the router.
Yeah. Maybe do that before the next show to see if that makes
See
it
if
more
that's
stable.
an issue.
Yeah.
And then it's perfectly steady again.
Yeah.
So it's
So who
just
knows?
odd.
Okay, so anyway, what I wanted to point out about, because I was raised a strict creationist. God started on Monday. He started on
Started
Sunday
Sunday.
and finished on Friday, and
was
Saturday
finished.
he rested.
Yes.
And that was how I was raised.
Oh,
But
no, he finished.
yeah, he
that's
rested on
right.
Saturday, the Sabbath.
Seventh day.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I was speaking of it from a Gentile point of view that we rest on Sunday.
Yeah, well, Gentiles, we get confused with how Sunday's the first day of the week. When I was in Israel working on kibbutz, I became very firmly aware of Sunday being the first day of the week because Sunday was Monday. That is, we worked on Sunday. That was, we had Saturday off, and then Sunday it was back to work.
My grandmother would not have been happy in Israel because Sunday was the day of rest. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Yes.
So it's important to understand that the Bible is not a science book. God is not trying to explain how he created the universe. If you are aware of mythology at the time of the writing of Genesis, it was written specifically to counteract the mythology of the civilizations at that time.
Right.
And so that's a really important thing. So it's more, the 6 days of creation is more of a literary device, I would say, than it is scientific fact.
Well, the reason that you can see it's a literary device is that when you look at the 6 days of creation, first day you have separation of light and darkness. Second day you have separation of the waters above and the waters below. Third day you have separation of dry land from the water. Fourth day you have sun and moon and stars created. The sun for the day, sun and moon for the night. Light and dark, light and dark. The fifth day you have the birds in the air and the fish in the sea. That is what lives in the waters above and the waters below. And then on the sixth day you have what lives on the dry land, animals and people. So the structuring of the 6 days is thematic, not... See, one of the confusing things, if you think in terms of the days being chronological, is how is it that you have the earth created and you don't have the sun until the fourth day? And then how do you have light and darkness if you don't have the sun? And it gets confusing when you start doing it that way. Plus also the earth is going around the sun, and so what's the earth doing if there's no sun? It just doesn't work. But when you understand it's a thematic arrangement, then the problems go away. But when you understand it's a thematic arrangement, then modern day creationism kind of goes away. So
Right. And basically my stance on it is this, because it doesn't change the fact, regardless of how God created the earth and the universe and whatever, it doesn't change the fact that he loves me and cares about me and that he sent his son to die for me. So arguing over creation, although it may be fun for theologians to do that and enjoy yourself, have a ball.
I do immensely enjoy myself talking about these sorts of things.
To himself.
To myself mostly, because nobody else listens to me.
But it doesn't, whether you believe in evolution, creation, whatever, it does not change that God created everything. How he did it, he did not divulge to us. Maybe he said, let's let them figure it out. And that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. Right now, the prevailing theory is evolution. Is it accurate?
One of the issues, too, and this is a hard thing for some people to comprehend, is that the Bible is not complete revelation to the human race. The Bible is sufficient evidence to the human race. That is, God did not bother to tell us everything that we could possibly have a question about. That is, there are a lot of things that he just didn't bother to talk about. Partially because you can figure that out on your own. That is, he does not in the Bible tell you how to fix an issue with your printer not working with your computer. That is, that's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. The Bible is not going to help you.
The manual for the printer doesn't even tell you.
No.
So, good luck.
Google may eventually help you. But the Bible is not going to help you fix your computer. Of course, if you can't get on your computer because your computer's not working, then you can't get to Google, and so you're really hosed. But the Bible doesn't tell you how to fix your car. It doesn't tell you how to fly an airplane. It doesn't tell you how to build an airplane. It doesn't tell you that you can build an airplane. It doesn't tell you how to do open heart surgery. It does, there's any number of things the Bible doesn't bother giving us the information about because we can figure that out. And sometimes Christians think that the Bible is going to give them an answer to everything. No, it's not. It's not designed to. It's designed to tell you, how do I relate to God and how do I relate to other people? Love God, love people. Fairly simple. Everything else is commentary.
Right.
And so it's not designed to tell you the theory of relativity or to tell you how to...
Why your feet stick to the ground.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think
Or how many planets are in the solar system.
a lot of Christians really struggle with giving up that that part of it. Like, okay, I know God did it, I just don't know how. I'm the same way with eschatology. I was raised with the pre-trib, pre-mill
Right.
belief.
Yeah, left behind.
Right.
Great planet
It
Earth.
never made sense to me. My dad had tons of charts. He preached on it all the time. It never made sense to me. It was really complex. And the real part that bugged me the most is the second coming of Christ. If he comes in the rapture, then when he actually comes at the very end, that's the third time. And I questioned that with my dad, and he said, well, it's the second time his feet touch the ground. The Bible does not say that. He was here once when he came as a baby and was crucified, and he's coming again twice. So I don't understand this whole thing. Like, it is so complicated. And so I don't know how the end times are going to be. But it doesn't matter, because here's the thing, is there had been prophecies about Jesus coming the first time, and they missed it because they had an idea of who this guy was going to be. And there had been other messiahs before Jesus, around the time of Jesus,
And after Jesus.
and after him. And they missed it because they had a preconceived notion about what it was going to be. And so I've decided that God knows, and Jesus even said, only the Father knows the day and the time, but we need to be ready. And so that's kind of where I stand, is we need to be ready, because it could happen any day. There may or may not be a tribulation period. There may or may not be a rapture. I don't know. I'm not willing to lose friends over it or to separate from other believers over it. If you want to believe that and it makes you feel better, that is totally fine with me. I'm good. I generally don't discuss it. One, because it's so confusing to me, and so that I just usually sidestep that topic. But I think if we just put our faith that God's got it handled, and I don't need to, it's just like when you're going through a hard time in your life, like this COVID thing right now. Ultimately, God has this thing handled. Men are going to fail. Governments are going to fail. Healthcare workers, try as they might, they're going to fail. We are human. We're going to fail. God has got this. He knows the outcome of it. He knows who's going to survive. He knows who isn't. And I just have to rest in that. I have to do the best that I know to do with the information that I have, and live my life, and to love God and to love people, and let God figure the rest of it out. So, and it's very freeing to believe that. And same thing with eschatology and everything else. I have a friend who's a Jehovah's Witness who we became friends because she's a Jehovah's Witness. She was coming to our house every few Saturdays or so. And it just boiled down to the fact I told her, I said, look, you are not going to convince me, because my faith in Jesus is that strong. But I am happy to talk about Jesus with you. But if you don't accept that he's God, we really don't have much we can talk about, because we kind of hashed it out. She recently sent me a letter, and I have to sit down and write it. She hand wrote it, so I need to handwrite it, which takes me a long time because I have some damage to my right hand, 2 injuries, and so it's really hard for me to write out longhand. But I'm going to sit down, and really all I'm going to share with her is my personal experience with Jesus. That, because I'm not going to be able to argue the Bible with her. They've already got their own Greek text. They've got their own Bible and all that. All I can share with her is my life story. And so I decided that that's what I'm going to do. And that's a lot of writing. So I need to kind of pace it out. I just need to sit down and start writing and get it going. Because that's the only thing that is going to, for my testimony to her, that's the only thing, because I'm not going to be able to convince her with the Bible because she doesn't believe the same Bible. She does not believe that Jesus is God. And even though it says in the Gospel of John that Jesus is God and his whole purpose is that we can be with him, she lives under the tyranny of being lost in the apocalypse. And she has to keep visiting people, writing letters to people now because they're not allowed to visit. And they have to do this. So when the apocalypse happens, they have to be doing God's work or they are going to be sent to, I don't know if they get vaporized, eternal damnation. Oblivion. And I just want her to know that God loves her and wants her to live forever. And yeah, she can go to heaven. She doesn't have to worry about oblivion. But it's this constant thing. And it just, it makes me sad for her. But I'm not, my point was that living under a certain belief, like I have to believe this or God's going to reject me. I have to believe in 6 days of creation, or I have to believe in pre-trib, pre-mill, or, my salvation is worthless. No, that's not true. Jesus gave us a free gift. He didn't say, okay, you can have this gift if you tell me that God created the earth in 6 days, or you can have this free gift if you believe that I'm going to come back in the rapture and save you all from suffering before it happens, which to me is kind of the chicken way out. But
who likes suffering?
I know. But anyway, that's not what God offered us. God offered us a free gift, period, end of story. Here's a gift. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So I'll get off the podium, out from behind the podium.
Very good.
Now.
And this is, I would say that fundamentally, this is the issue that people have, and why we get into a lot of the problems that we have, is that we think we have to have an answer to everything. And the reality is, most of life, we're pretty confused most of the time. I mean, if you look at the Gospels, and I'll talk about this tomorrow actually, the disciples spend most of their time, all the way through the Gospels until the end, not really quite knowing what's up. They don't know what's going on. They're constantly confused. They're constantly misunderstanding.
And Jesus even tells them point blank, I'm dying, and 3 days later I'm coming back to life.
And they still can't get it.
And they're like, oh my gosh, he's dead. Now what do we do?
Yeah, they're constantly confused. And this is the human condition. That is, we are mostly confused most of the time. I have a very poor sense of direction. And so I usually don't quite know where I am. Ever.
I didn't say anything.
Yeah. But that's, we don't really know our place in the universe that well. That is, we have far more questions than what we have answers. That is, we know a remarkable amount of how the universe functions, a surprising amount. But yet there are a lot of fundamental things that we still don't quite get. And there are a lot of questions that we still have. For instance, this week, the InSight probe on Mars, they've been trying for the last 2 years to dig a hole. That is, the whole purpose of this thing was to dig a hole into the ground with a thermometer so they could get readings from,
It hasn't been able to dig in?
For it.
Because we were there when before they blasted, we were at JPL before they blasted it off.
Yes, and that's what they wanted it to do, and they designed it, they got the Germans to build this thing, that part of it, to drill a hole, put the thermometer, get readings, and so they'd understand more about, what's going on in Mars underground, which is something that, we don't really know that clearly about. They have spent 2 years trying to get it to go more than a foot down.
Really?
Yes.
What's under there that they can't get it through?
It just won't go through the dirt. That is, it won't grab hold enough. That is, dirt's just not the consistency they're anticipating, and the little device can only drill through certain kinds of dirt, and it can't go through this kind of dirt. And they've been trying and trying and trying all sorts of things, try to get it to go down. They finally have given up. And so the only thing that probe is doing now is registering Mars quakes on a regular basis.
Oh, so Mars has earthquakes?
No, they have Marsquakes.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So it's not
But it's
unlike
got a
living
size
in
mom.
California.
Yeah, well, they're not that big.
Okay.
I
Well,
think
California has a ton that are not that big.
I know, so it's similar.
Yeah.
They've
Anybody
had-
on the Pacific Rim?
We get 3,000 a year. Most of them we don't notice.
Yeah.
Because they're too small.
I love it though when we get like a 4.1 and they go, there's no reported damage. It's like if you have damage from a 4.0 earthquake, even if you're sitting on the epicenter, there's something wrong with
How they
your
built
house
your
or,
property.
yeah.
Yes. Anyway, going back to the InSight probe, that is, they'd never done this before. They had a sense of what they thought the dirt was
sorry,
like
Dawn.
there based on other places they visited on Mars, and so they anticipated this thing would work. They happened to get a place where the dirt's different and it didn't work because they don't know.
Right.
That is, if we already knew, we wouldn't have to do this sort of thing.
Right.
And so what they have done by this not working is that they have learned a lot. And so the next time they send a probe, it will be designed better.
Right. Well, you fail your way to success.
Exactly.
So
If you knew the answers, you wouldn't be trying to find out. And
we watched
that's
it.
okay not to know the answers.
We have a program that we use at school called Vocabulary, and it's like a rap vocabulary thing. And I have been using their social emotional stuff to teach the kids about things like having grit and being curious and things like that. And they were talking about Thomas Edison and about how he failed his way to success with the light bulb. Now, I know there's an argument about the whole Tesla Edison thing. That's not the point of
That
this.
has nothing to do with light bulbs, though.
Right, that was the electricity
Well, DC
thing.
versus AC.
Right. So, which ended up being a band, so who knows. But Edison and Tesla made their own band called
AC/DC.
AC/DC. But anyway, so we talked about how he failed his way to success with the light bulb. One thing that he didn't fail his way to success with was concrete furniture. So thankfully, because that's extremely, so imagine that scene in Friends, pivot with a concrete couch. So anyway,
Yeah.
we're just really amused by our own
Jokes.
stuff, yes. So, but anyway, so the thing I wanted to say, kind of going back around to the whole creation eschatology thing, it's okay not to know.
Right.
And
In fact, you don't know, and so
it's better that you admit
embrace the fact
Right.
that you don't know. That's what human beings are very loath to embrace the idea that they don't know something, that they don't understand something. But the only way that we can manage to grow and develop and to learn is if we acknowledge that, I'm kind of ignorant. And also, if you're if you actually become educated, then all that really does is reinforce for you just how ignorant you are. That is, the more you learn, the more you realize you know nothing.
Right.
It is, Socrates was described as the wisest of men because he realized he knew nothing. This is what we have to get to, is the understanding that I'm really confused. Most of life, you're very confused.
Well, I think a book that is really eye-opening, we're doing it in Sunday school, is reading scripture through Western eyes. And it's interesting because we're learning about, it was a study that was done on Discover the Word that I listen to every weekday. They do like Bible studies that are like 5 days long or 10 days long. And it's a group of them. It used to be called Radio Bible Class back in the day. But anyway, so they did a series of, I think it was a 10-day series with the author, one of the authors of this book, and it was really intriguing. So I brought it to our Sunday school class once we were finishing our other books that we had done and asking if they wanted to go through this book. And we've spent like 3 or 4 weeks on the first chapter because there's so much in there. But it's interesting because one of the things that he pointed out in the study, and we haven't gotten there yet in Sunday school, but misreading scripture with Western eyes, removing cultural blinders to better understand the Bible.
And the author is
Randolph Richards
and Brandon J.
and
O'Brien.
Brandon J. O'Brien. So they had been missionaries in Papua New Guinea, and they saw how people think differently and in other cultures. And we, being Americans, being of Western culture, we want things to be scientific. We want, like, you look at times in the Bible and it's like, he did this for 40 years. Well, it wasn't like on the 40th anniversary something different happened, or whatever. It's general, because time, first of all, they didn't have exact timepieces like we have now.
They didn't have clocks yet.
Yeah, they didn't have clocks yet and things like that. And in Western culture, we need to know the time down to the second because of, space travel and GPSs and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so he talked about the ancient, the biblical culture being an honor system, and the scripture in the Bible about women asking their husbands questions in private instead of asking in church always kind of bugged me. It's like, and we actually had a family that left our church because he allowed me to speak in Sunday school. And I was allowed to speak my mind, ask questions, things like that. And the Bible clearly states that women should ask their husbands at home in private. Well, being an honor system, in that time, if I asked him a question in public, that would be challenging his honor, and that would be demeaning him as a man in the eyes of the community. But so, like, for example, a really good example of this was the Pharisees questioning Jesus in public. They were trying to trap him, and they were challenging his honor. But Nicodemus went to him in private because it wasn't an honor challenge. He legitimately wanted to know. So when Jesus was asked questions in public, he had a kind of a comeback for them because he knew they didn't really want to know. They were just trying to trap him. But when Nicodemus came to him, Nicodemus really wanted to know. And so that's kind of that idea. But see, in Western culture, we completely miss that. And then also, too, about women wearing head coverings, because is it the prostitutes wore head coverings and the wealthy women didn't? So Paul said all women in the church should be wearing head coverings. So you can't tell the prostitutes from the wealthy women. And because we're all one. There's no male nor female, Jew nor Gentile, and so on. And you shouldn't know the rich from the prostitutes. So anyway, so it's a really eye-opening book, and I highly recommend it.
Because we live in a different culture now,
Yeah.
a lot of these things don't really impact how we conduct ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
So
interesting
anyway, this
perspective.
particular book,
I think I forgot to reset my timer.
could be. This particular book is published by InterVarsity Press. It came out in
did.
2012. And it's a good book.
Mm-hmm.
Recommended. You can get it from Amazon. It's available both Kindle and paperback, and audiobook for that matter.
Yeah. So, but it has discussion questions that are really good.
Right.
As a matter of fact, part of our doing chapter 1, I asked everyone to watch Fiddler. Fiddler on the Roof has been on Netflix. And I asked them to watch it. And it was interesting because one of the people in Sunday school had never seen it before. And she thought it was fascinating. But what's interesting about it is as Tevia's culture changed, he found himself struggling to change with it. He had in that time and in that place, they did arranged marriages. Well, he had 2 daughters that arranged their own marriages. One daughter fell in love with somebody other than the creepy old butcher that she was supposed to be married off to. And then the other girl married Starsky from Starsky and Hutch, who was a rebel. He was one of the part of the communist revolution that was starting to happen. And Tevye, he was able to warm up to the fact that his daughter didn't want to marry the creepy old butcher, but that wanted to marry the boy that she was in love with. He was able to accept that, but he had to draw the line at the communist guy. And eventually there was some amount of reconciliation, but our culture has gone through such a huge and very quick shift because of social media and things like that. It's been hard for the older generation to really accept a lot of the cultural changes. God hasn't changed, but the culture has changed. And so we need to change with it in order to love people and in turn to love God. So anyway, so it's really, really interesting. I highly recommend the book. If you can read it with somebody and discuss it, I think it's really important. I think just reading through it, it'll give you a lot of good information, but I think the richness in it is having those
Particularly if you have
discussions.
people in your life that come from different cultures, because then they can discuss how they had to adjust to different cultural norms. So
Right.
For instance, we have one person in the Sunday school class who grew up on the mission field. Her parents were missionaries. And so she has a lot of insight into how cultures are radically different and adjusting and living in those things. One of the things that's happened in Christian missions in the last 100 years is a shift from trying to convert people to live like Americans to simply converting people to be Christians, and realizing there's a huge difference between Christianity versus American cultural norms. They're not the same things.
Like, for example, when her parents they were in West Africa, they dressed in the clothing of the people. So she wore a bubu. It's like a muumuu, but it's called a bubu. He wore a turban, and turbans are actually a good idea in that area because it is so hot. They dressed like the people did and it made them more approachable. So, and they didn't require the people to change their clothing or their behaviors. Like one of the things, the women, they did wear shirts, but very often they wouldn't be, like if they had babies that they were nursing and things like that. Like it wasn't a big deal to see a woman without a shirt on. And what's interesting is that they, whether they were in a shirt or not, but if you were in the marketplace and wanted to take pictures, they had skirts on, but they weren't wearing anything under their skirts. But if you took their picture, they thought you were stealing their spirit or their soul. And so the women would flip their skirts up to cover their faces. So you're getting the all together down here, but their faces are covered. And to us, it's like, okay, that's kind of silly because you don't want people, because they always wore skirts. So you never saw those private parts. You would just see breasts and stuff. But they would cover their faces because they thought their souls were being stolen. And so it's just an interesting way and we think, well, that's silly. But no, to them, it's very, very serious. And that would be like somebody coming into your neighborhood and saying, in order to follow this God, you have to take your pants off and walk out with no pants on. It's like, I'm not doing that. So we allow, so in Western culture, you can believe in God and take your picture and keep your pants on.
The cultures are weird.
Yes.
So, and if you've not been out of I went, when I was in college, went to Israel to work on kibbutz 2 different summers. And one of the things I noticed is some of the people I was with, it was a group of young people from colleges, there were 50 of us all together, and some of them had more difficulty adjusting to not being in the United States than others. And so I remember we were on our way there, we stayed in Switzerland overnight in Zurich. And one of the people there was complaining about the fact that he had to change his money into Swiss francs before he could buy things. He's wondering, why won't they just take the dollars? And I think to myself, well, you're a moron. We're in Switzerland. We're not in the U.S. anymore. Of course they're not going to take your dollars. They need Swiss francs. It seemed obvious to me, but for him, he just couldn't wrap his mind around that, why can't I use my money?
Mm-hmm. That
seems obvious, but for him, that was a cultural thing that was a bridge too far.
Yeah. And it's also important not to make statements about things in other cultures. I learned that when I was young. I was traveling with my family. We'd gone to Canada, and we'd gone to the bank to switch our money to Canadian money. And when she gave it to my dad, I said, "Ooh, Monopoly money."
No.
Yeah, not cool.
No,
so yeah,
nice.
thankfully I was young, so it didn't really matter. I mean, I was like probably, 14 or 15, but I hadn't really been out of the country. We'd gone to Mexico a few times, but so I learned not to say things like that. So when I went to Europe, I had a slightly easier time. It was interesting, though, to watch the teenagers that I travel with, though, really realizing that America isn't the only place that there is on the planet. Like, they were like, after we had gone to several places, because we went to Malta, Sicily, the mainland of Italy, and we went to France. And after we had been to several places, one of the prevailing questions was, did they just build churches everywhere they went? And I'm like, yeah, they would build the cathedral first, and then the houses would be built around it, because that was the center of life then. And they were astounded. They're used to seeing a lot of churches, because in America we have a lot of churches, but in any little village, hamlet, large city, whatever, there's a cathedral and then the town around it. And you don't have a bunch of little churches like on each corner like we do in America. And there's not a lot of choices because a lot of them are government sanctioned churches. But you do have, like in the center, you've got the cathedral, and then you've got the residences built up, businesses built up around it. So, but traveling to other countries is always a good idea.
Thing.
Yeah, always, unless there's a pandemic. Then maybe
then
not so much.
not.
But yeah, stay home.
Yeah, it's safer.
Yes.
Once the pandemic's gone, travel. It's a useful thing. It will broaden your mind and help you overcome blind spots in your understanding of things.
One thing that my parents did that I think was really helpful in making me be more flexible in other cultures, because we didn't really travel out of the country much, like Mexico and Canada, which is not significantly different from Mexico, like going to other places, but different from Mexico, from America, than going to like places in Europe and Africa, which I've never been to. Oh, I've been to Australia too. Different, but similar in a lot of ways. So anyway, but one of the things that we did do, with my dad being a pastor, we were always at the same, like at our church every Sunday. But when we would go on vacation, sometimes we would visit different kinds of churches. We went to a Catholic church, we went to a Pentecostal church, and we would just like pick a different kind of church to go to. And we had rules when we were there. You weren't allowed to laugh, you weren't allowed to ask questions, you sat quietly. Out of respect for what they believed, we didn't participate in some of their rituals. But like if it was something that we did in our church, we might. But for the most part, we just sat very quietly and just observed and listened. And I think that was good, because then when I go to other places, I am an observer, and I listen and I'm quiet about it. If I have someone I can ask a question of, now I will ask, like I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I will ask somebody like, why do you do this? You know, is there some reason? And a lot of times they don't even know why they do it, because it's just the culture. They don't know why they do it. It's how it is. Like Americans are very pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard and you'll be successful. You can have the American dream. We have there's a lot of speckles around me.
Yeah, I've got
like all of a sudden.
Yeah,
so anyway,
something else to check next time.
Because this background isn't real. It's actually a green screen behind us. But
yeah, but apparently there's something weird about.
Maybe it's because of the light this
the
time.
light
And well, the
different.
room's getting really dark because the sun's going down. I bet that's why.
Hey,
Bert, will you turn the lights on and see if that helps?
Hi, everybody.
Yeah,
Go
just
turn the
don't
lights
interrupt.
on.
Just turn the lights on.
See if that makes a difference.
I know. But anyway,
We got 2 minutes.
Which one?
The big ones.
yeah,
Both of them?
both.
Yep, both.
Try both. See what happens. Wow, now they're on my face. Okay. Yeah, just turn them off. We'll live with it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're experimenting still.
Yes.
Well, wait.
Still learning.
One is different, so what does that do?
It's a little better. Just to leave one on there. Anyway,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
we're done. So anyway, so it's important to just accept what they do. If you can learn about what they do, if you have someone that you can ask, but they may not know, because there's a lot of things we do in America that we don't know why we
just
do
go
that.
through we do it automatically without any thought.
Right.
A lot of
Oh, I was
things we
going to
take
say
for
the
granted.
pull up by your bootstraps, because we are a country of immigrants and pioneers and explorers. And
Actually, I was going to think of a more just cultural thing that we don't think about at all, and what other people notice about Americans as being weird. We smile too much. we smile a lot more than what they're generally
Interesting.
used to. So, just one of the things that we do a lot.
Interesting.
We're also unusually talkative and friendly.
Not me, though. I'm so quiet and demure.
Yes.
I think I kind of hijacked the show, personally.
Wait, what?
No, it's fine because I think it all worked.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
So,
we're at 5 o'clock now.
yes. So next week's topic is the hardest thing.
And I will be joining.
Maybe.
Okay. And then we are here every Saturday at 4 unless we're not. So please follow the Facebook page or subscribe to YouTube so you get notifications about when we go live. And then if you're looking for a church to worship with, we're here in person. We are open if you're in the Antelope Valley at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. And if you are not local or you are uncomfortable with attending church because of the pandemic or for any reason, you can tune in on Facebook or YouTube, the Quartz Hill Community Church pages, follow and subscribe. And we're 11 a.m. Pacific time is when we go live.
Right.
So anyway,
And I will be
Okay.
we'll
joining.
see you next week.
Yes.
See ya.
So,
Have a good week, guys.
Yep.
Stay
Bye.
safe.